Hello, everyone. I'm back with another campaign diary of The Ghost in the Machine about the home game that I run with me and my friends to provide you insight and analysis to running a game that hopefully everyone will enjoy. When we last left our heroes, they had just been through quite a lot. They had witnessed the failed resurrection of the Grand Duke of Midrim, been thrown into space, fought a voidling, hurled back into Edda, only to discover that they had been traveled 200 years in the past. Travel back to the present day by talking to Midgar Lang, the representative of the Lang Consortium, a group of time-traveling and intergalactic merchants. Once they got back, they discovered many people had been dead in the Void Blast and that something escaped and fled over the ocean towards Droska. Gilly got a magical ring to cure her of the blues by making friends with Morgan, the international superstar and elven figure. The party awoke the next day to find a magical letter from Erky Timbers pleading them to come to his rescue in Stilltower. And this episode will be about their journey to Stilltower and their eventual confrontation with Putrid Stilltower, the corrupt and sinister lord of the Tower of Silence. In this episode, we will recap that. I will tell you all about the fight. Hopefully, you find it as entertaining, or at least half as entertaining as we did. The fight itself was very climactic. It was very intense, and I am going to, in the analysis portion, break down the anatomy of a boss fight for this level 6 party, and how I push them to their limits so that they may confront life and death as they know it, and then, in true Dungeons & Dragons fashion, collect loot afterwards. So, let's get into tonight's episode of The Ghost in the Machine, the Lord of Stilltower. The party at breakfast receives the letter from Erky Timbers beseeching him for help. Selena replies in a manner to deceive anyone other than Erky who might have received the letter. She says that we'll be there tomorrow, but really they mean to travel today. A clever deception on her part. They split into 3 groups, but before that, Dryden at breakfast senses for aberrations. He had the idea to do it, and he senses for aberrations and discovers there is one beneath the castle, either in the catacombs or in the crypts beneath the castle or something, and he wonders where that might be. He also senses an aberrant presence on Sovelius, which he assumes is the void crystal that Sovelius has on his person. The party then devises a plan and splits into 3 groups. A few of them go to Confessor Grantham, Sovelius goes to talk to the Countess of Avamere, and Justice goes to talk to Wendell Wilkins, the disguise or the alternate persona of the Wind, the Grand Master of the Order of the Mercurial Shadow, in order to purchase diamonds to fuel Gilly's Revivify spell, in case any of them die in the confrontation with Stilltower. The conversation with Selena, Gilly, Dryden, and Confessor Grantham goes rather well. He grants them potions of healing, 10 potions of healing, as a matter of fact, and 5 greater potions of healing, as well as 1,500 gold for party supplies for this covert mission. Gilly is worried that this might reflect poorly on our family, being part of a covert mission to assassinate another lord, and Confessor Grantham reassures her that this will reflect well on her family in his mind. Sovelius informs the Duke and the Countess of Avamere and the Examator Callie that there is an aberrant presence in the crypts of the castle, and the Duke very snarkily says, "What I keep in the crypts of my castle is my business." The party also suspects that it might be a lingering aberration in Thornorian's body who's being kept beneath the castle. But Examator Callie reassures them that there is no aberrant presence and that the resurrection has already been successful. Not on Thornorian, but they resurrected whatever the void creature that flew off to Droska. Justice goes to the pawn shop to secure the diamonds, and Wendell Wilkins talks to him as a diamond merchant would to a customer, and not a smidge more. Justice speaks cryptically to him, and Wendell Wilkins doesn't engage. The party reconvene and then go shopping. They've done some research, and they bought some potions of fire resistance, and that's about the extent of their magical purchases from the Dragon of Cragmandu. They discover that the Dragon of Cragmandu is packing up her supplies and leaving. She's going on a sort of vacation, she tells them, and she won't be around for quite some time. The party get done with all that and then make for Stilltower. They make a quick pace, they get there in due time, begin to scout and to plan. As the party approaches Stilltower and gets closer and closer, they see this kind of infernal storm brewing ahead, green flames and red cracks of lightning. No thunder is audible, just baleful moans and weird screeching noises like a banshee riding the wind. Party scouts and does some recon, and the scene that they find is as follows. Erky Timbers stands next to the fallen body of Fandel, his dire badger steed. He is tired, he is hurt, he is bleeding on his head, he has his sword, he has his silver sword, his shield, and he is up against 5 figures, 4 townspeople with weapons, and 1 Bright Fizzle, the gnome wizard mercenary from the Blazing Aegis Company of the Durfin Archipelago. Selena moves in her cat form, having used Wild Shape, and rubs up against Erky's leg in a kind of reassuring manner. Erky, not sure what to make of it, just kind of looks down. Bright Fizzle sees an animal and assumes that Erky is calling for more help somehow because he's a paladin of the ancients, so Bright Fizzle knows this. Bright Fizzle begins to cast a spell, holds it a tick, nothing happens, and then hurls a fireball at Selena. Not knowing it's a druid, much to his surprise, Selena pops out of the form, casts Absorb Elements, and then the fight is on. This fight is not much of one. They quickly round on Bright Fizzle and kind of target just him. Dryden knocks him, kills him with 2 successive strikes, and the rest of the gnomes that were battling, who were kind of pressed into service, lay down their arms and say, we don't want to fight. We were just scared. We were scared for our lives. Justice takes the pistol from Merhana, the gunslinger. Party reconvenes, heals up. Erky casts aid on all of them, and they make for the Tower of Silence, where the center of this infernal ritual. The party had originally planned to fly and use rope to kind of get on top of the tower and hopefully take Stilltower by surprise by coming in from the roof hatch. It would have been a great plan, and I was ready for them to do it, except for I realized then, as I was describing the ritual, that the tower was wreathed in flame, and a spire of fell energy and death was shooting out from the roof. So it would have been a bad idea to enter from the roof. The party thinks better of it and sees that the door is actually open to the Tower of Silence, and they realize that is their path. Erky tells them that the tower opened about halfway through the day after Putris took hostages, and that's when all the baleful moans and the shrieking started. He said it was like the tower was letting something out, but he really has no idea. Justice gets the idea to disguise himself using his Cowl of Shadows, aka a Hat of Disguise, to disguise himself as Bright Fizzle and act as if he's taken the party captive. They get all in captive mode, and they go in. And I get to do my Putris Stilltower voice, which was a lot of fun. They enter into the foyer, and Bright Fizzle goes, Master, Bright Fizzle, Justice, goes, Master, I brought more hostages, more sacrifices to the ritual. And Putris Stilltower goes, oh, how wonderful. Bright Fizzle, you've always been such a good servant. But I don't remember you being a warforged. And the door slams behind them. They have a brief moment where they decide where to go. Stilltower spends some time mocking them and taunting them because he's invisible and hidden. They're making perception checks. They can't discern where he is. And they move in more into the room. Gilly rolls an insight versus Stilltower's deception and discerns that he wants them to go into the basement. He keeps saying, come to my basement where the ritual is taking place. He wasn't deceiving, actually. He was just speaking true. So she discerns that, and so they tried to head north. Erky and Sovelius, the kind of tanks of the adventuring party, move in first behind, and everyone is following shortly behind. When they get so far into the room and are about to reach the stairs, a wall of fire separates them, and that is when the fight is really on. Lord Stilltower drops his invisibility, and he also drops from the ceiling. He uses legendary actions to create that wall of fire. Separated by the wall of fire, with their charge on the other side, the party kind of goes into a panic. Dryden runs through the wall of fire, taking substantial amounts of fire damage. By this time, they've all quaffed their potions of fire resistance, helping them a great deal. Putris starts hurling fireballs into the air, one after another, some from his staff, some from his own casting ability. He uses Eldritch Blast to cast on Justice, and then hurls him into hell. Justice gone for a round, severely dampening their damage. The rest of them are just piling in on Stilltower with their damaging abilities. However, he is highly resistant. Erky is using the last of his few spell slots to cast Divine Smite and tear into him with a silvered sword. Sovelius is taking the lead and keeping Stilltower occupied with his rapier. Gilly and Selena are on the other side of the wall, unsure of what to do, and casting Moonbeam up and over the wall, kind of mid-sky, and letting it rain down on Stilltower, but he's resistant to Radiant. Justice returns the next round, having taken 55 points of psychic damage, and falls an unconscious husk, but is eventually propped back up by a healing spell. Future Stilltower uses Power Word Stun on Dryden and stuns him for a round, but thanks to Urki's aura, they're able to make a lot of these saving throws for all these powerful spells that he's throwing at them. And that's when Lord Stilltower turns to Urki, realizing that with him there, he's never gonna get through all these little miscreants that are attacking him, and he casts Power Word Kill on Urki Timbers. Urki Timbers, crying out in pain and in horror, blood leaking out of almost every orifice, he falls and collapses, screaming and telling the party he doesn't want to go. Gilly pushes through the wall of fire, casts Revivify on Urki, and that's when Future Stilltower attempts to plane shift her to hell, but she succeeds. He uses the last few charges of his staff, the last few spells he can cast Blight on Justice, doing 42 points of necrotic damage, but thankfully it was counterspelled, otherwise Justice would have been killed by that Blight. And then he pulls out a black scroll riddled with vile speech and attempts to cast the 9th level spell Gate, which is also counterspelled. Once that happens, Lord Stilltower is out of resources, and he submits to his fate. He casts Chill Touch on Sovelius, it misses. We describe it as Sovelius taking his blade and kind of knocking Lord Stilltower's hand aside and then popping the rapier into Lord Stilltower's chest. Cast Booming Blade, which causes the parts of Lord Stilltower to separate in a thunderous boom. And the Lord of Stilltower is dead. And that was where we left the episode. So, that was the episode. Overall, it went very well. The fight was incredibly dynamic, incredibly challenging. Lots of things were happening. And we all had a lot of fun. And that's the most important thing, right? The party was well prepared. And they triumphed over a sinister foe. And so now, in the analysis portion, we'll break it down, right? We're just going to get into all the numbers and everything that I was working with in order to construct an encounter of such a high-level enemy against such a low-level party, and some of the tricks I used in this, using the rules of the system to put them up against the kind of character that could cast 2 9th level spells, right? So let's get into the analysis. And this is where I fade out of view. So this is Putris PD Stilltower. This is the picture from... So the base of what he is the Devil-Bound Gnomish Prince from Kobold's Press Tome of Beasts, which is a fantastic third-party 5th edition supplement that you should have if you like to have creative and deadly monsters to throw at your party. I started with the Devil-Bound Gnomish Prince and modified and built from there, raised the challenge rating, and added some magic items. That way he could be a singular and deadly enemy. I had already kind of sent out a test balloon in the Voidling to test the limits of the party against a creature with some legendary actions, some resources, and some power, but not to this extent. So I already had a good comparison when I was worried about the numbers. So as we get into it, there are some things to keep in mind. I created Putris Stilltower with the idea of having, again, a singular and deadly enemy for my party to confront. Deadly in the sense that he presented enough of a challenge to perhaps maim and probably kill at least one of them, but not so overwhelmingly stupid that he would annihilate the party with giving them little chance or option to defeat him. As this is a kind of more of a long-term campaign, having a TPK this early because of my own incompetence would be something that I really didn't want to happen. And when I say incompetence, I mean my inability to design a monster that was powerful, but not too powerful. Because as DMs, we have overwhelming power. We are gods of the world. So defeating our players is not really a singular accomplishment. It's not actually anything to brag about, because it's just math. You know, if you do too much damage to them in a short amount of time, they die. And that's all a TPK is. And that's really all combat really ever is when you get down to it. So what I am looking to do here when I built Putrid Stilltower and added on to the Divilbound Gnomish Prince is to create thematic and intense situations. And we'll break it down how that worked. It's worth noting that a lot of this is pretty much baked into the system, of the challenge rating system. You can read about it in the Dungeon Master's Guide. But I was customizing a monster, and so when we get into customization, we can sometimes lose sight of the original monster that we've built on. And I wanted to really push the limits of what a 6th level party could take on. So let's just get into the nitty-gritty here. So when we start with his defensive capabilities, he's got an armor class of 15, which is about right for a powerful spellcaster that's going to be dishing out lots of damage, is highly mobile, and has lair actions. He can't be too hard to hit. Between them, they only have about a plus 6 to 7 attack, depending on who the character is. So any more than an AC of 15, we're gonna start getting into slog territory, and we really don't want to fall into that. Hit points, he's got a little bit more hit points than the Voidling does. The Voidling had about 220 hit points and went down fairly quickly, but Putrid has far more resistances. He's got better saving throws, better stats, and he has more damage resistances as well as 2 damage immunities, which will make this HP last much longer, especially considering Dryden ends up not bringing any magical bow or magical arrows to the attack. So this HP is actually about 1/5 or about 25% higher than it actually seems to be. So I'm keeping an eye on this, and I'm willing to adjust it on the fly if I felt like I added too much. But as it turned out, it was just right for the party composition. Saving throws, he's got a decent spread here. The dexterity means he's susceptible to some of the better damaging spells of lower levels, but his fire resistance means he's not really susceptible to some of the better damaging spells. You know, he's immune to things like fireball and melts minute meteors, but he's also not immune to things like call lightning or erupting earth. So they have the ability to exploit this and pile on some damage. Strength, he can be knocked down pretty easily. Constitution saving throw, he's not going to be losing concentration on his wall of fire, which he uses to control the battlefield. Intelligence saving throw, he's probably not going to be falling for any illusions. Wisdom saving throw, he could perhaps be suggested, commanded, fooled, not dominated because they don't have access to those spells, but he could be frightened or charmed. Charisma saving throws, he's staying where he is. He's not teleporting anywhere that he doesn't want to teleport. And of course, whenever those lower scores fail, he has legendary resistances, but he ends up not having to use them because they don't provoke that many saving throws. Because again, they're mostly an attack-based party when it comes to defeating their enemies, especially once you factor in the fire damage immunity. So those are his defensive capabilities, and then so their offensive capabilities, which I'm comparing to. I will say I don't worry for most fights. I don't worry too much about what they can do versus what the enemy can do. I expect through the complexity of the 5th edition combat system that the truth will out. But I just wanted to make sure when designing Putrid that I hadn't made a mistake. I had a real fear that an enemy that could cast 2 9th level spells, had a lot of fireballs to throw at them, and et cetera, could overwhelm them easily. So I really was paying attention to the finer details here. So their offensive capabilities line up rather well. They have at least one high damage source of... They have at least one magical weapon attacker in Justice who will be making 2 to 3 attacks around. They have some places to exploit his lower saving throws, and they have some potential to charm or frighten him, which would make it for an interesting fight. But he also, again, he has legendary resistances, so they have means to burn through them if they needed to. His offensive abilities are where things get really interesting. So he has 3 5th level spells that he can cast. He has a 6th, a 7th, an 8th, and a 9th level spell. And he also has a 9th level spell, Scroll for Gate. So he is going to be dishing out large amounts of damage through the Fireball spell and an AoE. Also, he has the Clutch of the Elder Gods, a staff that allows him to cast Fireball and Agonazar's Scorcher. So he's going to end up, he has 2 more fireballs from his staff. And just in case that the fireballs, the fire-based damage that they know about because they were able to do some research on him isn't enough, he has some recourses. He's got Ray of Sickness, and he's got Blight. And Blight actually ends up being the last spell slot he uses, and he almost kills Justice with it, but it gets counterspelled. And he's even got Flame Strike, which is half fire, but it's also half radiant. So he has some ways here to offensively challenge the party outside of fire. And he also has fire, which turns out is perfectly fine, even with the party having potions of fire resistance. Also, he has Power Word Kill. He can just select one of the party members to kill at any given time, and that is going to create an intense moment whenever I use it, and it does. He kills Urki. Their saving throws drop because Urki's bonuses are no longer around, and Gilly ends up having to go through the wall of fire, take a lot of damage, and then cast Revivify. In turn, Urki returns the favor and brings a Gilly out of unconsciousness with Lay on Hands, which means that Sovelius ends up getting the killing blow. So that worked out very well. Powered Word Stun, he's going to be able to lock out a damage dealer. And then Plane Shift. He can send one of them permanently to hell. And boy, oh boy, wouldn't that be dramatic. Eyebite he ends up not using. I could have changed this out for Circle of Death, but he would have probably... The room was small enough. It's a 60-foot radius Circle of Death. It's 8d6 necrotic constitution saving throw based spell. And it's 8d6 necrotic. But it's a 60-foot radius. He would have damaged himself in that, and I wasn't really comfortable using it. And Eyebite could have been useful. He just ended up not using it. He was done. He had been defeated, and he was ready to die, I guess you might say. So Fireball, 5th level Fireball is 10d6. That's average about 38 points of damage, and they're only 6 levels, so they're going to be taking a lot of it on the nose. That being said, they have abilities. They have Absorb Elements. They're a pretty dexterous party. They might be saving a bit. They've got Urki boosting their saving throw bonuses, and they have Potions of Fire Resistances, which is already having the damage from Fireball. So I am able to throw at them 10d6 every once or twice around, plus perhaps an 8d6 or 10d6 fireballs, and they are constantly taking them, and they're still able to survive, and that rewards their playstyle, their preparation, and their knowledge and investigation. So he is not pulling any punches. 5th level fireballs against 6th level players, it's no joke. It's not a softball. He means to kill them, and I'm not holding back. And it's only through their careful preparation that they are able to outlast his damaging capabilities. A quick mention about utility. He has Witch Sight, so I knew they couldn't get by with any kind of invisibility or illusion or transmutation-based deception. And he also has Infernal Blessing, which means every time he knocks one of them out, he's going to be gaining more hit points. And this actually becomes really clutch towards the end of the fight. He keeps knocking them out, and it keeps extending his life form. They keep chewing through the shield. He knocks one of them out. He chews through the shield and knocks one of them out. And this is actually potentially a death spiral ability. And so I was really playing with it here because by adding all this extra hit points up here, I had made this into a potential death spiral ability. But again, my players are very smart, they're very deadly, and they ended up triumphing over it. Oh, quick note about the offensives. He could render one of them unconscious with hurl them into hell, which he does to Justice, or potentially even kill them. 55 points of psychic damage is no joke. They have no means of resisting that. So, magic items, he's got them all. He's got the Clutch of the Elder Gods, he's got the Cloak of the Bat and the dark-studded leather armor of the Gloaming Court, which allows him to remain in dim light, and he can fly around because of the Cloak of the Bat, and he's got the Clutch of the Elder Gods, which allows him to throw fireballs. He's got magical resistances, he can cast a lot of spells, and he's got Witch Sight, and he's got Devil Sight and Eldritch Sight, so he's a very perceptive character. He has many ways of detecting certain things, seeing through illusions, seeing through magical darkness. It's going to be a straight-up fight when it really comes down to it. It's going to be about his ability to fly above them and rain fire down, separate them with wall fire, try to beat them back, isolate certain damage dealers, kill the most problematic enemy, and overall, when it's said and done, attempt to summon a devil or some unknown entity with his gate scroll, which actually ended up getting counterspelled by Sovelius. that is the overview of Putrid Stilltower. So let's talk about more the drama of Putrid Stilltower. And that is that this enemy, so they're level 6, right? And I remember all through the fight, they're sitting there talking, like they're like cheering, like they're level 6, as he doles out the damage and unveils more and more of his abilities. You remember, the party doesn't know what he's capable of. One of my players, told me after the fight, she's like, I expected, 5th, maybe a 6th level spell. She's like, when you cast a 9th level spell, I was incredibly worried. And then when you tried to cast a second 9th level spell, I was like, what the... So that is exactly the feeling I was trying to invoke. So these terms and these things are thematic, right? Fireball is an iconic spell. 9th level spells are iconic. Power word kill is iconic. These things that he was doing are iconic and terrifying in their own right. Beyond them, though, are the reality of the numbers. So there are other 9th level spells that at their current ability would have wasted the party entirely. Shape change, probably, if he shape changed himself into an ancient red dragon or something, or an ancient black dragon, or if he had foresight or meteor swarm. Any of those likely would have annihilated the party and made it too difficult for them to overcome him. But because I chose power word kill and used it intelligently, I was able to establish the fear and the intensity of a 9th level spell without it being overwhelming and unfair in the way that something like that could easily be. And in the second 9th level spell, Gate, they were able to counterspell it, which, I mean, how often could they do counterspell? How many times does that work? I don't know. They've got a pretty good odds once you consider you can add Bardic Inspiration to it, and they've got 2 different people that can attempt to counterspell it, so I wasn't worried. Same goes for Power Word Stun. It's a big, iconic spell. Maddening Darkness from Xanathar's Guide, he could have cast that, but that might have been too much. Feeble Mind, that could have worked. Glibness would have been interesting, but probably ultimately would have been pretty weak on the weak side. And then 7th level, I actually traded this out from Finger of Death because I wanted the moment, rather than just him dealing out a bunch of damage to one character, which he already had the ability to do, I wanted the moment of him attempting to send someone to hell. Gilly gets Urki up, and he sees this after he spent one of his largest resources on killing Urki, because Urki is helping everyone make the saving throws. And so then he attempts to send her permanently to hell. But she's got Bardic Inspiration. She's a charisma-based character, and she made the tactical choice, the moral choice of getting Urki up, and benefited from it, and was able to make the saving throw. So those are the kind of iconic tools I use to tell a story. What is the story here of Lord Stilltower? He sets up some ideas that will become more relevant later in the campaign, potentially. So some of the party members are attempting to enact social change. And to me, in some ways, Lord Stilltower is potentially, depending on your perspective, potentially emblematic of some of the lords and ladies of the Gishari Republic, some of the higher up lords. And I remember after the fight, I mockingly, kind of jokingly said, hey guys, congratulations, you just defeated a low-ranking member of a relatively low-ranking noble from a minor settlement. And they're like, yeah. And Justice jokingly said, okay, Justice is going to go and retire on a summer island or something like that. And I was like, I was establishing the raw and incredible power of the Gishari ruling class. Now, it's not like every noble they meet is as powerful as Putrid Stilltower, but there was a sense in which that this man, in all of his power and all of his capability, was defeated because he was isolated. He doesn't have nearly the resources as some of their potential enemies that they've already started to make, and some people that they've met along the way that they've targeted, and they've decided, this person I'm going to come into conflict with, or they plan to, because of their own motivations. So Stilltower, while he had never really wronged any of them in all that way, he was behind the excavations in Fort Platino, and he did pay those bandits, but he hadn't really wronged them. He had wronged others, but he hadn't really wronged the party. So he was this kind of test balloon, this warning, this omen of things to come. And I wanted to establish that the road ahead pretty much no matter what they choose to do. Of course, they can always alleviate it and survive by being intelligent and being creative and paying attention. But the road ahead would not be an easy one. And that leading any kind of potential revolution or just interfacing with the Gishari ruling class will be one of the most harrowing and exhausting experiences of their entire lives. And I feel like I was able to achieve that by thinking about the player's abilities, thinking about my own, playing some clever tricks with certain spells, choosing to actions based on narrative, and mixed with motivation rather than just an intent to kill, which I don't find very interesting. Because that, at the end of the day, is our job as DMs to create adversity, but not to be their enemies. We're not out to, I don't think as DMs we're necessarily, it depends on the table, and it depends on the goals, and it depends on some things. But generally speaking, as DMs, I don't think we're out to kill our players. There's a lot of talk on the internet constantly about, haha, TPK, killed this player, killed that one. Some of it's snark, but some of it's serious. There are a lot of DMs out there who find great delight in killing their players and defeating them in combat. But I've always found that to be one of the least interesting things about D&D, because again, from my perspective, if I have all the power and all the cards, defeating them isn't interesting because I could do it at a moment's notice. What is more interesting is to walk on a razor's edge of life and death using design elements that exist mostly within the rules, and that reward the players for creative thinking, problem solving, intelligent play, and proper investigation and research. And that is what I attempted to do with the Lord of Stilltower, and it worked. It worked well enough. And so, moving forward as DMs, I think we need to keep in mind that we are creating narratives and we are creating dangers for our players, and those two don't have to stand at odds. The game elements of the game are storytelling elements. The fact that Fireball does a lot of damage is a lot of fun to roll, but it's also a part of a story. Power Word Kill, killing someone, can be a lot of fun for certain parties, but it's also part of the story. What does it mean? Who is Stilltower selecting Power Word Kill, and why? Circle of Death, had I went there, why is he willing to risk his own life to overcome these foes? What are these things when we go to roll these D6s and D8s to deal out the damage, or if we make players make saving throws, what is the narrative we are trying to tell? And that is what I attempted to do with the Lord of Stilltower. I wanted to establish the raw power of the Gishari ruling class. And I know I did that because based on the table talk afterwards. So let's always keep in mind that the gamist kind of adversity elements of DMing and the narrativist elements of telling a story do not have to be at odds, that we can accomplish both if we just are thoughtful about it, plan, and pay attention. Thank you.